Play, Watch, Listen is a mostly games industry podcast featuring mostly game developers, and it is funded entirely by supporters on Patreon. No, I did have something I wanted to talk to you about today, Mike. Austin put a question mark on the event, so he might be joining us. I think he's too busy.
He maintains an air of mystery at all times.
Yeah, we're doing our best to keep the show alive, but, you know, post-pandemic, people be working. We're trying our damn hardest.
It's a nightmare.
Austin is super busy, working or whatever. Moneybags Austin, more like it. I played Myst for the first time, Mike Bithell.
Okay.
I played 1993's Myst for the first time. Have you played it? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?
I mean, I played like in the 90s, yeah, but I can't remember it very well. Like, yes, I remember playing like because it was the big deal. It was that CD-ROM games era. So yes,
right.
It was a big moment for all of us back then in the day.
And
I'm gonna age visibly in this call. I can tell already. I'm gonna find glasses on.
It is the year I was born, which is why I hadn't played it. But so I really enjoyed it. Game took me, I finished it in one sitting, which I always do with any game like that, where like if it's short enough and I'm enjoying it enough, I'll just sit there and like ruin my life and play it. I really enjoyed it, and I guess what I played is technically a version that's called Real Myst, which it wasn't because I just played it on Xbox. It's just called Myst. But so the original version of this game, I've never played any game like the original Myst actually. It was almost in slideshow format.
Yes.
You would have individual images
joining up the
I actually don't even think it had video, but you would know better than me. I think it was just.
I might be combining it because there were a lot of games that came after it where there would be a still image of, and then you would play an animation of like your character turning 90 degrees.
It might have actually. I really don't know.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure.
All I know is like people talk about it being like a slideshow, and then it was just a series of images, and then you would click. And I don't think I've ever played a game. I maybe did when I was a kid, and I just don't remember. But I can't even imagine how difficult that would be. Whereas the version I played, I believe, is in Unreal. And, you know, if you haven't heard of Myst, everybody, yeah, it's quite famous for being one of the first games, you know, it came out the same year as Doom 93, which obviously was also huge for this, to make people kind of understand what video games could be.
Mm-hmm.
It is a puzzle game. I love The Witness. The Witness is probably one of my favorite games, and The Witness is so clearly a Myst-like. Where you just get dropped on this island. You have very little information for what you're supposed to be doing, other than that you have to help somebody who is trapped, I think is what it tells you. I don't even remember. And there's a pirate ship, there's a cog up a staircase, there's a weird room that looks like it has some star maps in it, there's a random little statue of a ship with some symbols on the sides of it, there's a clock tower, there's a tree, there's a spaceship, and there is a power generator room, and that's it. It's just like, here's this stuff, figure it out. And it certainly felt that way for me while I first started playing it, more than anything, because there's a note that you're supposed to find really early on that I just didn't see. So I was like, this is the hardest game ever made. What the fuck, the 90s? Because I was like playing with.
Does it have the FMV stuff in it?
It does have FMV stuff in it. So and it did when it came out too. So that
Yeah. That's why I was wondering if they did that in 3D or if they tried to do like animated characters.
No, the FMV stuff is exactly the same because they're just little characters who sit like on books. So it's just a little screen. Though. No, actually, sorry. They are animated now. They're not FMV as in the actors, but they are still just 2D. Where I think some of the further games have.
I might be
think there's like
confusing
5
it with
Myst
Riven,
games.
because I think it was Riven that had like FMV characters actually would walk through the scene. Basically, you'd be playing it and you'd be doing
yes, and I believe Riven still has that. And Riven. I just played Myst randomly at the start of this month. I was replaying Hellblade, and I think I got bored at a certain part. Hellblade's a great game, but there was like a point where I was like, maybe the mood wasn't right or something, and I was like, why don't I just play Myst? I have that down here. Why don't I just give it a try? My friend Jared Petty, who some of you might know, we worked together at IGN, now works at Limited Run Games, was staying with me, so we just played Myst together. And Riven, the remake of Riven that is also a full 3D remake, is also coming out this month, like just by complete chance. Cool. So now I'm like obsessed with this thing that I don't want to play yet because I want to wait for this remake to come out on Steam, because I'm super excited to like be into Myst now because I just love this kind of game. But there was some really interesting stuff about the development of Myst that I did not know because, again, all I knew was puzzle game people love from the 90s. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that any time that I mentioned The Witness to people older than me, they always go, "Oh, it's Myst."
It's Myst.
And I,
Yeah.
again, I fucking love The Witness. And I will say there are things that I think The Witness does that are a lot better than Myst. Like Myst, again, when I first started playing it, I thought it was the hardest game on the fucking planet. Until I realized that I was just missing that note that actually over explains things way too much. like,
Yeah.
like I walked in there, thought I had no information for anything, which is what The Witness does. And the world of The Witness, if you've not played that game, incredible. The world of The Witness teaches you its own language
Yeah.
in a very readily apparent way. Like the first level, you're going to kind of immediately learn what a puzzle is and how to solve one of them, and they get more and more complex. Myst, if you miss that note, you just show up, you don't know what anything fucking does or what you're trying to do or
This is before
anything.
we knew we had to playtest games, Alanah.
It's
This was
true.
These were the days where no
It's true.
playtesting existed as a concept. Yeah.
However, though, Mike, this is a really cool thing
Yes.
about the development of Myst.
Tell me.
The way they did their playtesting, they had three separate kinds of playtesting. One of
They
them,
actually playtested Myst. That's
they
amazing.
playtested Myst. One of them was a fully functional D&D game. To make sure that
Oh.
their concept of game design in Myst worked, they played it out as a full D&D game, which I think
Hmm.
is such a good idea. And I was like trying to picture what that would look like. My friend Kate Siegel is coming over next week, and sometimes she's like, "Can I watch you play video games?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I was gonna play Myst because her son is also a stepson is also coming. Uh, and I was like, I wonder if I could play Myst for them like it's a D&D game where I'll just be like, "Tell me what you want me to do," and then I'll go
Hmm.
and see if I can do it. Because I think that's such an interesting concept to test puzzle design. That they would just be like, because in theory the player would be like, okay, I try rotating it clockwise, and then you would just tell them what happens. I can't see
Yeah.
any reason that game wouldn't work that way. I mean, there's one level, it's like a water level where you basically have to follow pipes along a route to see. You power things through water. You have to follow pipes, and you could hear the water if they're running through the pipes or not. And there are a bunch of
Hmm.
points where you can turn the direction of which next pipe to go to. I can't see any reason why you couldn't do that as a D&D game. Like, it makes perfect sense
No.
that they would do all that game design testing through just their own version of D&D. I was like, that's so fucking cool. What a good idea.
It's also
Especially
such a good
because
way of finding out what verbs people want to try, right? Because it
what
is
people
that
want to attempt to do,
open-ended,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
what occurs to people, like logically. Because that was the big thing with adventure games, was like that first draft of like from text adventure to like graphic as adventure before Myst. There was always that kind of thing of they were often very short games with very obtuse puzzles that would kind of prolong, so you wouldn't be able to you wouldn't take the game back, and it grew into this thing of like a cliche in graphic adventure games, especially, was just that there was just such a impossibly obtuse puzzle that only made sense if you designed it, and that was one of the things that led to, I assume, ideas like
Mm,
this where people started to actually question the idea of, well, what would they intend to do? What would be the thing they tried in this situation? And can we design a game that rewards you for doing the thing that intuitively makes sense,
yeah.
rather than, oh, I have to go to these 5 places and stick these things together and solve a puzzle that way?
Yeah, I mean, I love Grim Fandango, but I feel like there are puzzles in that like,
Yeah,
the
totally.
fuck? Tim Schafer? How dare you? There's stuff
How
in that,
dare
like,
you two?
I do really love that game, but I feel like there are some things that I'm like, how was that the solution? Whereas Myst, I feel
Yeah.
like it is all pretty intuitive, and the only game design things that got me were effectively red herrings in that it was something that I could interact with all of a sudden, and I was like, why can I interact with this? That doesn't make
Hmm.
any sense. There was also apparently because I finished Myst, I really enjoyed it, and then I just googled a bunch of shit about it. There was also two extra forms of playtesting they had. One was a person who was fully recorded and was speaking. The second was completely silent. So they made the second person not speak so they could just observe exactly what they
Hmm.
did without hearing anything they were saying or hearing their thoughts out loud. And those were just the two kinds of playtesting, or three kinds they did, was D&D, a full basically let's play, and then a person who was completely silent. It was like, I guess nobody back then really had any standards for what playtesting was. The
I mean,
guys who
you'd be
made Myst,
surprised. It's still a debate now, especially those last
true,
two.
true,
Without revealing any information, I remember a playtest where genuinely I kind of got into a bit of an argument with the play. So playtesting often nowadays is very professionalized. There are people
yeah,
who specialize in it and do it, and we as like game designers and directors will often go along to those playtesting sessions and kind of listen in, but not really kind of run the thing. And I do remember one playtesting session where I got really frustrated because the person administering the playtesting kept talking to people while they were trying to solve puzzles. and then
Mm.
that led
Mm.
to that person not figuring out what they were meant to do next, and I remember being very annoyed by that. So there is still debate. I'm a big believer in the kind of let people play and just watch how they play and where they get stuck and kind of see what happens organically and interview them afterwards rather than during. But there are different schools of thought on that. People still argue that
I
case.
did a bit of
The other
playtesting
thing,
for
sorry, go
Ragnarok, for
on.
certain boss fights, which, I'm sure a lot of studios do a bunch of internal playtesting,
Of
especially when,
course.
the games that we make are so big. But yeah, they interviewed me afterwards. They'd be like, "Why did or didn't you do this?" Or like, "Was
Yeah,
this obvious?" Like whatever. I don't think anyone ever spoke to me during, because yeah, that would
it would distract you, right?
I think it would distract you a ton. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, and I wonder if Myst. It's an interesting kind of fork in the road as well for you to go. I'd encourage you to go and look at like other contemporaries that kind of ripped off Myst a bit. One I
So
loved was called. Oh, you did. Oh,
I
sorry.
I looked into, again. I was like, "This is super fucking cool." That like so like I was saying, two brothers, no video game experience. They just
Mm.
decided to make something, and I love that, which meant their approach is so unique. Um, but I looked up like about various of the Myst games, avoiding the plot, because like it's not like I imagine the plot's gonna be great, but I do intend to play through all of them now. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
waiting for Ribbon. And there are a couple of games that I hadn't heard of that I found really interesting that like beat certain games. The I think there's one that was called like the eighth party guest, or the eighth house guest, or something along those
rings
lines.
a
That
bell.
that
Yeah, I
it
don't know it
beat one of
well.
the Mysts for a game of the year. It's basically like you show up to
Eighth
this.
house guest.
Yeah, I should. Well, if I open my Chrome, it'll cover the whole screen. But
This is such a golden moment in game design, though.
the eighth house guest, the eighth guest game. Yeah, and it was just, and so many games. The seventh guest, I was so close. So the seventh
Oh,
guest, which is
you're thinking of the sequel.
yeah, an interactive movie puzzle adventure game, came out also 1993. And yeah, I looked it up because it
Mm.
beat Myst for a few of the Game of the Year awards, and I was like, okay, well, what were the games that were being picked as Game of the Year, if not Doom, in 1993? Because my head is just always goes to Doom, and this game,
Sure.
which I again had never even heard of, um, was one of the first computer games to only be released on CD-ROM. It's a horror story told
Mm-hmm.
from the perspective of the player, who as is an amnesiac, so it's sort of like an isekai type story. It's basically a house with a bunch of puzzles, and one thing that people really liked about it versus Myst is that if you had trouble solving a puzzle, you could go consult this thing and ask it a question, and for every puzzle you solve, you get a piece of FMV that will tell you story. But if you ask the book 3 times to help you solve the puzzle, you won't get the story. And I was like, what a cool idea. So players don't get stuck, but if they have to rely on it for hints and they get to the third hint, it'll just solve the puzzle for them. They don't have to worry about it, but they'll miss out on the story as a cost of that. And I thought that was just like a really neat
That's really fun.
idea. Yeah, again, game I hadn't even heard of that won a bunch of awards back in 1993, of like just like such an innovative time in the space. And there were so many challenges that they had making Myst because of the size. So I think like I should pull up the actual data, but there were issues where like, rendering something would take a full 48 hours, and to load
Mm.
between two scenes would take like way too long. Like they had to just figure out the limitations of space, of size. Like they just had so many challenges with actually getting the game to run, that I think it was still pretty slow when it launched, but they just had issues. This says
Are you young enough that you don't remember when computer graphics took? Like, I remember as a kid when I was messing around with 3D engines, I would like have to leave my computer on overnight to render an image. Are you young enough that you kind of missed that era of 3D graphics
I don't
entirely?
recall that. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember like trying to watch something on dial-up internet and it needing to walk away from my computer to get it to load.
yeah.
But I don't remember that with video games. But I mean, it may have happened. Like the games that I played, the first game I
I mean
remember
making
playing is
art. I
called
mean
Moto
making a
Racer.
frame of art.
Oh well,
Okay.
I never tried, so I wouldn't.
So like there
Yeah,
was
when I was a
like
kid, I
so
wouldn't
like
try.
I feel like Myst might have even used this software. There was a piece of software called Bryce, which was like a landscape art tool.
They
Basically, you'd
used
make like
HyperCard
terrain.
software apparently. But sorry,
Okay.
go ahead.
So okay, so Bryce was the one I remember playing with. Which, if you look up like Bryce software, you're going to find some amazing screenshots that look very unimpressive. But I need you to know that each of those images ended up taking like you would leave it going overnight to make those, and it was the
Crazy.
best.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
So
they
yeah,
have the
so
same
48
thing with
hours
Myst,
makes
right?
sense for me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For like a
It
commercially released thing, for sure.
Yeah, it says some frames took hours to render while others took days, and then they were enhanced
Mm.
using Photoshop 1.0. Um, it says overall Myst contains 2,500 frames, one for each possible area the player can explore, which like I've played point and click adventure games, obviously, but I guess I'd never played anything again that like is more like that slideshow format. That
It's a weird bubble. Like it was only about
yeah,
5 years. So I remember. So the one I loved was Starship Titanic, which I actually ended up studying.
that's
One
a
of my
cool game
tutors.
name, Starship
It's a
Titanic.
great name,
Yeah, what a
and you
title.
and great in the sense that you know exactly what the storyline of the game
100%.
is.
Yeah.
But the it was the producer on it ended up being one of my tutors while I was at uni, so I actually kind of got to
Hmm.
like ask her behind the scenes questions and kind of learn a bit. But it was Douglas Adams, so a writer
Oh, it was
who'd done
Douglas
some adventure game
Adams?
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And it was, and so that came out in. I just looked up. It came out in '98, so it's kind of one of the games that was like people playing Myst and going, oh, let's see what we can do. So Starship Titanic is very similar, kind of slideshow moving between views, but that one was very notable because it had a text parser, so you could actually talk to the So it was a crashed spaceship manned by robots, and you would talk to them via you write text messages, and it would chat back to you
Hmm.
with
That's
actors.
super
They
cool.
put they basically cast. I think it's most of Monty Python are in it, playing different
No
robots. Like this
way.
is you should go and find
Yeah,
this
I wonder if I
game.
can
This
still play it.
exists.
Starship Titanic.
It's got to be. It might be an emulatory kind of a thing now, but like this was.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's
okay. It's
that's one.
very Grim Fandango aesthetic. Oh no, I can get it on Steam, dude. I'm gonna buy that right
Really?
now. Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna have a lovely evening
April
playing that.
2nd,
It's a
1998.
mess of a game, but I love it so much.
Added to cart. Love that.
But that was the era, and I think as well it was something. I think we're in that era again, which is cool. But it was I remember as a kid, so '98, I would have been 13. That game looked the way the graphics I was able to make looked.
Hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was playing around with 3D software then as a very, very cool teenager. I was
Clearly.
going home every evening playing with 3D software. True Space, Bryce, Poser, a bunch of people in their 40s are very impressed by that list of
Surrounded by women.
first software.
Yeah.
Oh, that you! I couldn't keep the women away, Alanah, with these hobbies. Are you kidding me?
It was just all. It was so hard to make those
Oh,
images with all the
I was like,
girls.
please leave me alone to make some art, please. But it was really, but that was what was. That was, what was thrilling though was like as a nerd making this stuff, the things that were real professional games that
Looked the same as the
you
stuff
buy
you were
or you
making.
save up look the same. And
That's
I feel like
cool.
that then diverged, and
Yeah.
we're now right back at a point where a kid can download Unreal Engine and start making something that genuinely, if they grab a couple of assets and lay them in the world, approaches what they would see in a commercial game. And I think that's really, it feels like with games, with music, with film, we're always branching away and coming back, right, in terms of
Yeah.
like how achievable something is.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I guess the
just Starship
triple A's.
Titanic and getting nostalgic, it's
It
beautiful.
looks
Sorry,
great.
carry on.
Um, the triple A's stand out, I guess now. Like, I was gonna say that I feel like video games are more accessible in terms of like making them now than they've ever been. But then the Myst story is literally just two brothers who
Yeah.
had never made a game before, and look what they did. Hugely commercially successful. They had no game experience. The whole thing was not inspired by other video games. Which I think is a part of it that I definitely spoken about this on the show, that I always find the inspiration for things. Like, I definitely think they made Myst because they had never played a game before. So no one had ever told
Yeah.
them the rules of what they could or couldn't make, which I think was the same thing that happened with Citizen Kane. Was like, dude didn't know how to make a movie, so didn't know the rules for making a movie. So it was like, well, fuck it. This is what I'm and how I
I'll make
think
a
it
movie
looks.
the way I think it should be done.
Yeah, and I think there's like
But that was a
there's
big
so much
thing in the
creativity in that
CD-ROM
space.
era.
Yeah.
Because there was no, and this is a weird thing to explain. I actually, this was something someone I work with asked me about the other day. Was they were asking me like what did my mentors teach me about game design, and I had to kind of explain like the people who taught me game design weren't game designers, because game design's only existed as a field where that was a job for about 20 years. So the people who taught me game design were the 3D artists who were shit at coding and who wanted to kind of come up with how to make the games more fun, and had kind of found themselves falling into that role on teams.
Well, they are
And
still
it's
game
true
designers then, aren't they? Just like not by title.
they were, but they didn't come. They didn't go into a job as a junior designer. It was
There wasn't their
design was the job that
education.
was left over when everyone else like there's someone here who's very very interested but they can't code for shit and their art's not as good. We'll make them a designer. That's fine.
Yeah, sure.
And it's that era
Again, technically
where
on the design team at Santa Monica Studio, I understand. Can't can't code
I'm
for
a game
shit. It
designer.
makes
I'm a game designer.
it makes sense.
We're among friends.
We're all game
But it
designers here.
was but it was that was how it was. I guess what I'm saying is like CD-ROM era was defined by all of this kind of 3D art, all of these kind of PC based developments and approaches, and PC gaming as specifically with regards to like music and this kind of 3D art, all of these production values that were completely impossible beforehand meant that there wasn't experience. No one knew how to make a game with 3D art. That
Yeah.
didn't exist before, or with this kind of pre-rendered 3D art before CD-ROM. So that's why the people who were making stuff, yes, they were people who were not games people, maybe like Douglas Adams, very skilled and experienced in other things, but we'll bring those in. You see weird stuff like Bowie did a CD-ROM game.
Really?
I can't remember what that's called. David Bowie did like a CD-ROM game. There was
No
like
way.
a because it was a weird thing where them, and that's where you had I think that's the era as well where Virgin Music were making games, like, because it's a CD, we know what CD is, we can make something for that. Like it was a
We're
weird
CD guys.
moment. You had like, and film people got it because they were seeing video and they knew what video was, and it was a weird kind of melting pot because no one did know. Nowadays we've kind of, and this is something I've genuinely seen happen over my career, is just we've matured into an actual industry where there is like experience, and there are people who are, there are new people coming in all the time who have new and exciting things, and as you say, that's an edge that those people often have.
I do
But
think
back
there are
then it wasn't.
downsides to there being defaults in game design. There
Of
are like,
course,
okay, here's what
100%.
narratively we need the player to do. Also, obviously, they go fight some people, and it's like everyone just would be like, yeah, of
Yep.
course. But like, you can lose innovation in there being so many defaults because everyone's got so much experience working on similar kind of stuff. Whereas like Myst,
Yeah.
again, was very unique for the kind of game that it was when it came out. Two dudes who'd never made a video game. I mean, I think that applies to a lot of debut games, right? Like a lot of like
Yeah.
studios that make debut games that are just, they just do shit that they're never told they couldn't, so they just do
Well,
it.
that's
And
the
it's
theory why second albums always suck. Is the first album is usually amateurs who have been like performing the same songs for years and years and years, honing those songs, throwing out the rubbish.
yeah,
Like the first album was of every band was worked on for like 10 years. The
yeah,
second album was worked on for 8 months because they
yeah.
had to get something out the fucking door.
I think
I
people say
think
that
the
about
same
Ed
was.
Sheeran somewhat often. Like it's like I don't know anything
Maybe
about Ed
not.
Sheeran, but something like he was like he just toured a lot locally in the UK and then
Mm-hmm.
made a first album and then was very successful, and then the second album felt like a much more corporate version of the first album. I think I don't
He was around for a
know
very
anything
long
about
time.
him,
So I've
but
got like,
yeah,
I got like, yeah, the two friends who were like on the circuit at the same time as him musically, and all the stories are always very nice about him. But yeah, he was
I met him
around
the
for a
other
very
well
long
a few
time.
months ago. He was lovely. That's
Yeah.
but I don't know a lot about his music, but it is an interesting thing where it's like you can watch people. I definitely think this happens with movies, happens with games, try to replicate themselves.
Oh yeah,
And so the heart isn't
yeah,
there because you're trying to copy yourself. And so something can feel really off about that. Um, I don't know what this
and most
sentence
people don't know
means.
what makes their stuff good. Like if you set out to try and replicate a success that was almost most creative success, there is obviously a lot of thinking that goes into it, but ultimately it's accidental, or
Yeah,
it's the outcome of a situation. Thomas Was Alone is mostly known for having great voiceover. The voiceover was a decision I made 3 months before we shipped the game because I couldn't work out how
crazy.
to get the text rendering to work. If I'd been able to get some technical problem solved, I wouldn't have called Danny, and I wouldn't have had the career I've had. Like, and then when you sit down to make another game, you go, well, why did people like the last thing? And I think where the
Yeah.
mistake, as you say, a lot of people make is they go, they must have liked it because I'm really clever and I did all
Yeah.
the right things. And if I just am really clever
Start again.
continuously, I'll be fine. Yeah, 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 exactly.
Even though you didn't make half those decisions, they just kind of like showed up. Like it's
Yeah,
such an interesting
exactly.
landscape. Um, the Myst production doc says the environments were rendered in Stratavision 3D with some additional modeling in Macromedia macro model, while Rand would place those images into HyperCard to link them up and test the puzzle aspects. It's free software. I've barely even heard of. I've heard of Stratavision, but he
You
was
probably
putting
have
them in
never heard of
Hypercard.
Macromedia, right? Macromedia was like the shit for
Maybe.
like graphics
I
software.
don't think so.
The one you know is Flash. Before
Oh
Flash was
yeah.
Adobe, it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Macromedia
Yeah.
Flash. So yeah, that
Love
would be the one
Flash.
you'd heard of.
Oh,
Love
interesting.
Flash.
Yeah,
Classic.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
And there's some more interesting stuff in here about like troubles that they had that are really specific. So it says when Cyan, which is the name of that company, Cyan, began development. Developing believable characters was a major hurdle. The brothers were so limited to one-way communication with the player that at any point a player could just choose to walk away and break the spell of the game. Displaying video in the game was initially infeasible. Designing around the limits, the designers created the trap books, which are the things that have the actual video files on them, which were location-specific one-way communication devices. The release of QuickTime halfway through development of the game solved the video issue, which is like
Quick
what a
time.
what a funny thing to like. They were like, well, we need to have characters because we want to have a deep story. They were hoping that there would be a big moral ethical dilemma. There is like an
Mm.
interesting question asked in Myst, but I don't think that they really nailed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are characters that you can't talk to who can only speak to you, that you can have almost no input on what you do. Except I guess there are actions you can take that would either help or hinder them a little. But like, what an interesting problem to have. Like, okay, how do we communicate anything to the player or have these characters be believable when they can't talk back? They solved the problem. They didn't know how to do video, and then QuickTime showed up. Like, it's just
I like quick time as well. Like that's
killed
another
it.
era of CD. They like see with CD-ROM stuff. So QuickTime obviously video, but QuickTime VR was in itself like triggered an enormous sort of series of like events because
Yeah.
QuickTime VR basically allowed you to kind of pan around a panoramic view. And I remember making
Huh.
QuickTime VR stuff a lot as a kid. It was fascinating to make stuff, but there were like commercial products. There was a CD-ROM again, very cool kid. They did a CD-ROM that was just the bridges of all the starships from Star Trek, and you could kind of just pan the camera around and look around. That was like a $40 CD-ROM
Game.
kind of project.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no interaction. Well, there was a few little like mini games. You could play Snake on a monitor or whatever, but it was ultimately like a very simple thing. People, it's so difficult to describe to people now. People were so thrilled that you could have a video that you could trigger an event on. That's the other thing with Star Trek was like something like Star Trek Borg, which was an FMV movie that you'd make choices in as you went through. All of these things were just so, it felt like the future in a way that is laughable now, obviously, but like at the time it was just, oh my goodness. It was so mind-blowingly new and so completely unlike when you think like genuinely we went from Doom to Myst in what 6 months, like
Yeah.
basically like very very close. And even Doom was like top
Mind
of the
blowing.
pile
Yeah.
for 3D graphics. Like it was such an exciting moment. I think that's what you get. Some of the I guess cynicism you see in like people in their 40s who are still into video games is because when we were kids things moved that fast and it genuinely felt so thrilling in a way that like now you see the iterative kind of steps of like
The innovations
this
have to
console
slow
is better than
down.
this console, it's going to slow down,
Yeah.
and that's inevitable.
Yeah, but I also like
But yeah,
I'm always really staunchly against games are better back in my day stuff because I just feel
sure.
like if you ever say that, you're just not playing enough video games. Like you're not playing the right
I'm
stuff.
not saying they're bad, but
No, I know you're
definitely
not.
the
But
rate of technical innovation was fast.
100%.
Like,
Yeah.
by definition.
Yeah. And the way that Myst had to function, again, because they were using QuickTime to play those video files that, again, you don't see that often, and there are several of them, and you don't have to watch all of them. Basically, the game was like, it was a multimedia slideshow. There are essentially like multiple different programs that were being pulled on at different times to make the game run, which here they have written exactly how it worked.
It was basically like slideshow software, hypercards, wasn't it?
It says Myst had each age as a unique hypercard stack. Navigation was handled by the internal button system and HyperTalk scripts, with image and QuickTime movie display passed off to various plugins. Myst functioned
literally using macros to run software. That's incredibly
Myst
cool.
functioned as a series of separate multimedia slides linked together by commands. The main technical constraint that impacted Myst was slow CD-ROM drive read speeds. It's because of consumers, not because of the actual technology. So few consumers had anything faster than single speed drives, limiting the speed of streaming data off the disk. So most people didn't have good enough hardware to run this multimedia slideshow. How fucking funny is that? So they had to go to great lengths to make sure that all game elements would actually load as quickly as possible. Images were stored as 8-bit picked resources with custom color palettes and QuickTime still image compression. Animated elements such as movies and object animation were encoded as QuickTime movies. That's really interesting to me too. In total, there were more than 66 minutes of QuickTime animation. This careful processing made the finished graphics look like true color images despite their low bit depth. Stills were reduced in size from 500 kb to around 80 kb. And they would place related scenes and files as close together on the disk spiral track to reduce the seek time and in-game delay as player transitions from scene to scene. Like, what a unique, like not even unique really, just unfathomable now that was the problem when I can just load up Google Slide and I can in theory just make a video game right now. But they had to do this in 1993 when nobody had really done it before and figure out, oh shit, most consumers, like, it's just so many problems when you read over the development of Myst that they just had to figure out. Dudes with no game dev experience who were just, their whole ethos was they just wanted to make something that felt like magical fairy tale kids books. That's all they were after. And I just think it's such an interesting one that I had just completely never really gotten into. And so now I'm like hard in on Myst, so fucking excited for Ribbon, like ready to go.
I love it. I'm enjoying this hyperfixation.
I love a puzzle game anyway, you know, like it's yeah.
The thing that you said there that I thought was fascinating is because it kind of explains. So one of the interesting things about the aesthetics of Myst to my eye has always been that it's not monochromatic, but it definitely feels limited in its colors. And the idea that they were basically doing, it's similar to how GIFs back in, or GIFs, I don't know, whatever, were kind of done.
It's GIFs. Fuck that guy. It's graphics. So, unless you call them graphics. Shut up, creator of GIFs.
In the world. It's ours now. It's ours. It belongs to us, the audience. But like the idea of that, so basically that idea that they're using, it sounds like they were doing a different limited palette for every individual image, which means yes, you can do a full range of colors across the entire game, but within any one image, you're limited to a limited pool. That kind of explains some of the interesting character to some of the art in that game in a way that's absolutely fascinating to me.
Again, because I played
they could never have a rainbow room in that game. It always had to be kind of limited in that way, which is fascinating.
I mean, the books that you find are red, blue, and green for a reason. But I played the re-release, so I actually don't know what the original screenshots. I'm gonna look it up because I don't even know what it looks like originally. Okay.
It's a bit of a downgrade from what you played.
It's a bit of a downgrade from what I played. Well, yeah, I mean, they still got a lot of green.
Oh, I'm not saying it had no color, but it definitely has a limited palette per image in a way that
for sure
feels influenced by that limitation.
I remember
I think it's cool.
There's also like this quote from them about texture, which I found really interesting, which was something along the lines of like, you wouldn't believe how much just adding texture can make something feel real, like just adding a few bolts to a bridge or adding a crack. And it's like, well, of course we know that now. But back then that was like a huge talking point to them to be like, turns out texture's really helpful for making things look real. Like, again, of course we're like, yeah, just we'll make it look like a real thing. But like back then, again, nobody was really doing that. And they were like, this texture thing.
When they didn't have physically based rendering, so it was, I lived through that period as well, where it's not right. Like the way you make a material now is, it's an incredible art form, but it's still very much kind of rooted in the real world. That you go, okay, what are the physical properties of this surface? How would it reflect light? Therefore, let's make it realistic. Back here, everything was faked in a way that is very different now because of physically based rendering, and it was, you know, how you would do specularity, how you would make something feel bumpy or have a grain or a texture to it. It was it's wild how complicated these things were compared to back in my day. So no, it was incredible, and that artwork, I remember when the game came out, genuinely looked real.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
I remember as a kid looking at it and it being absolutely incredible that a game could look like that. Like,
isn't that weird? It just keeps happening because like I felt that way with the N64, and then I felt that way with like original Xbox and PlayStation games, and now you look at them and they look terrible.
2, I was like,
yeah, this is it.
2, this is as real as we need. We're done.
It's so strange that now you look at it and you're like, but. Like I wonder what it is that does that. That like I was convinced that Project Gotham Racing was the most realistic thing ever possible in video games, and now I look at it and I'm like, what the fuck? Like I don't know. I guess we just couldn't fathom how close they would actually get, and that means probably at some point we won't even be able to tell the difference. I guess there are already some games. Have you seen that body cam game that just
That's
came out.
wild. Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with the post process. It's incredible
Yeah,
because it does look like video. Yeah, it's incredible.
totally. And
To the extent I don't want to play it, to be honest.
me
Like, I think
too. It
I'd
makes
find
me a
it
little
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable. Yeah, like
Yeah,
I read some of the user reviews and
I respect the
it's
craft of it. It looks incredible, but
yeah, it
yeah.
sounds like it's like a bit repetitive or whatever, but who cares?
Oh,
But
okay.
looks very cool, and I feel like I do want to try it just briefly. But yeah, I guess there's like an issue, especially with a first person shooter, where if something is too realistic, you might be like, oh, I don't want to kill a guy. Like some people won't
Yeah.
care, but like yeah, it's almost too good that it's uncomfortable. I mean, a lot of racing games look very realistic. Forza is always like such a graphical showcase every single time there's a new motorsport, but like
Mm-hmm.
that, I'm not uncomfortable driving a car around a track, you know? I'm all right with that. I think I do want to try body cam.
Less moral quandaries. Right?
Yeah. Um, one other cool thing. So they have the silent play test of the game with two people sitting in front of the game, finding they would converse with each other, then had one person sit silently. There was one other thing here that I thought was really cool. And I've now. Oh, yeah. So it does say among the problems testers discovered with the story was that Myst had no inciting incident. In response, they added a note that clued players into a chamber. That's the note that I missed. That I was saying at the start of the game. I thought that I was just playing the hardest fucking game ever, and I was ready to go. And then I found that note, and it makes it way too easy. It's like, hey, go to this chamber, and it'll just solve the problems for you. And I was like, oh, come on! Like it's just way too simple. Forgetting what the thing was that I wanted to bring up also, but mostly I was just like, yeah, just feel like I needed to catch up on this little relic of video game history that also was just not marketed. It was almost entirely successful through word of mouth over the internet.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they had sample discs that were available as previews. It was ported to Windows in March 1994.
I feel like
but
it was given away sometimes with computers.
probably
as well,
demo discs or whatever.
I think. I remember, yeah, I think that probably the demo, as you say. I think maybe that's what I played because I think I played more of the later ones.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's Rand Miller, one of the brothers, said he believed selling 100,000 copies would be mind-blowing. It sold double that amount in 7 months. The game quickly became that publisher's most successful title, sold more than 500,000 copies by the end of 1994 and 1 million by March 1995. And those stats alone are really interesting. So if you say it sold 200,000 in 7 months, 500,000 by the end of 1994, and 1 million by March 1995, that growth is so specific, again, for something that wasn't really marketed. It was just all word of mouth, and you can see it in the sales. It was the best-selling computer game in the United States for 52 months, which isn't that funny considering how low those sales are by today's standards. Like, I guess 1 million is not nothing, but
that's why the women
52 months.
Exclusive club. Those of us who are cool enough to be into PC gaming,
Right? Women love exclusive clubs for sure.
They really do. It's very.
It sold more than 6.3 million units worldwide by 2000. Best-selling PC game throughout the 1990s until The Sims exceeded its sales in 2002. So yeah, the other one that they considered it was considered a killer application that accelerated the sales of CD-ROM drives and kind of blew up the CD-ROM. But the other one that was considered the killer application was The Seventh Guest, which, yeah, I've spoiled that game for myself because I read up about it. But let me see if I can buy that too, just to. I mean, I love a puzzle game. I love a point-and-click adventure game. And directly related to that, we go back super far. You know, I only just the other day looked up the origins of Deus Ex Machina because of a Myst criticism that they used a Deus Ex Machina in one of the Myst games. So obviously I know what a Deus Ex Machina is. Do you know what it translates to, Mike?
From? Ghost in the Machine. Or God in the Machine.
God,
God
from the machine.
Oh, from the machine.
Yes, which is such an interesting phrase. And do you know what it comes from? Like the origin? Because I had no idea.
Is it? It's a theatre.
Yep.
It's a theatre term.
Yes.
Is it from? I assume from Greek theatre.
It is ancient Greek.
Yeah.
And basically, there were old reviews of ancient Greek theatre
Yes.
where they would have a play, and then in order to resolve the conflict, they would literally have some sort of machine type thing that would just bring a god in and put them on stage, and then the god would be there and the plot would be resolved. And I was like, it's so fucking literal. It was literally the god came from the machine again and solved the thing. And so
what is the Greek chorus if not the result of overzealous playtesting? Like 100%. That makes perfect
but I
sense.
love the old reviewers were like, this fucking guy just showed up and like solved the whole plot, which is the same thing we're doing right now. Like, it's so funny to
Imagine
me.
writing a negative review so successful that the term lasts that
Still,
long.
and I didn't even know what it was from. Like, I also thought it was like Ghost of the Machine for some reason. But yeah, God
Because
from the
because
Machine.
the anime, right? Will have
Probably we've
100%
just
taken
decided
off
it's
the
Ghost in
anime.
the Shell.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a specific and such a like perfect term was that, yeah, they just had some sort of machine
Yeah.
that these fucking gods showed up in and solved all the problems. Like, how annoying is
This
that?
is 100%. But it's 100% because I just watched the Dan Olsen video. But it would be like if there was an angry video game nerd reference being used in like the year 4052.
Yeah.
It would be that kind of. It's weird. It's really weird.
But
love that.
it's
That's
so
amazing.
it's so perfect, and I don't think it was, yeah, I think it was like maybe like the third Myst. I avoided all the plots, but I read like receptions and critical reviews about all of them, just because I thought it was very interesting, obviously, which is why I'm talking to you for about it now for an hour for no reason. We like to stay really relevant on Playwatch List.
No, I genuinely love it because, and it's one of the things I probably bring up my age gap with people too often just because I'm hitting that age.
You're not that much older than me.
I know, but this is an area where it's fascinating to me
shows.
because I experienced all that stuff back in the day and had that context, and then hearing you talk about it, like even just like throwaway things of like when you're talking about like you were talking about the philosophical kind of quandary stuff in Myst and how you didn't think they really pulled it off. Back in the day, no one had ever tried to raise bad guy needs shooting in head was about as far as we'd got, and it's like so it's just kind of that context is fast because one of the things I it's on my list when I'm in a bit of downtime work wise right now. I'm just way too busy to play video games, unfortunately. Is I really need to go back and play all of the Remedy games properly. Because I was obsessed with Max Payne as a kid. Max Payne 1 and 2 I played through like 10 times, 20 times each. And then every Remedy game since then I've played and loved, but never
You have to play
really
you have to play them
invested
hard
to
to get the best out of it.
I know I'm missing out.
Oh my god,
Mike! I see memes and I'm like, oh, Max Payne
Dude.
nerd Mike would love that if he understood the layers that are in it.
They're
I'm gonna go and play
so unique, and I will stand by this take that I don't know if I think it's technically AAA, that Alan Wake 2 is one of the most creative AAA games ever made. Like, it's so fucking creative. So they just came out with new DLC last week as announced during Summer Game Fest. Holy fucking shit. Like, I've only played the first two parts.
Thumbnail, haven't I? I've just realised this is
It's Alan Wake 2. No, I'm 100% going straight for Myst. Just fuck them, who cares? But I was excited when I knew that Austin wasn't here this week, though I'm sure you would have had plenty to say about Myst. I was like, oh, sweet, I'll talk to Mike about Myst. That'll be great. But the new Alan Wake 2 DLC, there's a third part that I haven't played. It's very Twilight Zone inspired. The implication is that they're all little like hour-long chunks, Twilight Zone episodes, written by Alan Wake while he's in the dark place, and they fucking suck. They're like stage plays, or at least the first one does. That's so badly written, but it's so fucking funny. So there's this part where you're playing as a fan of Alan Wake, and you constantly talk about how incredible he is, and everyone in the town talks about how incredible he is all the time, and you found like his evil brother, and his evil brother, like, you get into his house or whatever, and he's got this note that's called torture ideas for hack brother, and it's like car battery, maybe electrocution, bell, not sure where to find a bell. Like, it's just this one list that is like time knife levels of funny that just, I'm just so happy I exist in the same timeline that Remedy does, because I just don't think anyone is doing it like they are.
I love it. I don't know how they've managed to maintain it.
Oh my
It's
god!
So
And the
impressive.
fucking
it's my big question. If I'm ever
how do they do it?
Have a lunch with Sam, I just want to know.
But he still said he's down to do the podcast. We just have to find the time to do it.
Well, I need to go and play them all.
Yeah, you should all play them all first.
How I don't, because they have had, there was a very big gap, if I remember right, between Max Payne 2 and the first Alan Wake. But they have managed to continuously put out games that are big and bold and often
quite
not
different,
like financially mega successful, and have survived and have been able to kind of maintain that
and still have their DNA. They're still themselves.
And that's what's fascinating to me. Like, that's so impressive.
And the broader universe also, like, The way that I'm sure that was an off. Like, I think that's happened almost retroactively. Like, obviously, Control and
Yeah.
Alan Wake have parallels, but I don't think that was
Well,
like
it was the
master plan the
stuff
whole
in
way through.
Control where I could tell they were poking back,
Yeah,
where I was like, okay, no, I need to stop, and I need to go back, and I need to engage with this
Alan Wake
properly
2 and
and
Control
follow it.
are almost like sequels in a way. I mean, it's not just
I
same
can't,
universe. Like, they're like,
right?
it's so fucking cool. And also, okay, the DLC again also has, because you're like a fan of Alan Wake, who is a shit writer in my opinion, which I find extra funny. I tweeted
That's
that.
the joke of the original Alan
I
Wake, right?
tweeted something like, "Guys, I'm starting to think Alan Wake's maybe a bad writer." And I think that made it to Reddit. I got a bunch of criticism because people assumed I was saying Sam was a bad writer. And I was like,
No, that's the whole thing.
no, he's
riffing on, like,
intentionally a
It's the
shitty fucking
Stephen
writer.
King thing.
Yes, so
As a Stephen King fan, it's like every Stephen King protagonist is Stephen King's like self-insert.
yeah.
That's the joke of
So
Alan Wake.
in the new DLC, when you're fighting the like Alan Wake bad guys, some of them yell, "He's a cheap Stephen King knockoff," while you're fucking fighting them. And it's like, God, it's so good. And like, I think Artie is one of my favorite video game characters just ever at this point. And basically, what they did with Artie, who's the janitor in Control, who is also in Alan Wake 2, is
amazing.
He speaks literal translations of famous Finnish sayings. So they don't really make any sense. I guess they would if you were Finnish, but to everybody else in the world, it's just like the thing he's saying makes absolutely no sense. And I think that's just such a specific, unique writing choice for this weird fucking guy who like is maybe God. Like they're incredible. I'm just so glad that they do what they do and that we all get to witness it. And I love Sam, and yeah, totally down to have him on the show. But I think both you and Austin were like, "Let me finish the game first." But I don't think Sam would care. I don't think he'd be upset.
I would care because I genuinely have looked up to him my whole I was a teenager playing Max Payne and obsessing over his cool face.
And that's his goddamn face.
I'm a proper. There's a few people in this industry. We were talking about a couple of them before the show. Like that genuinely for me, like that's the meeting some of those people has been incredible. But I always want to go into those conversations with good questions. So I'll play those games. What I need is everyone watching this or listening to this. Can you please buy my next game so I can take a month off and play all of these, please? Thank you so much.
Wish list everything from Mike Bithell on Steam, everybody, just all of it.
Well, everything on Steam right now has already come out, so buy Mike's games on
buy
Steam,
all of the Bithell games on Steam, everybody. That's the main agenda of this show. It's just buy Bithell games. Yeah.
You think I'm going to talk about Myst for an hour? I'm here purely
this is what you signed up for.
Reasons and clumsy allyship and commercials.
Yes, love that for us. But yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody, on my weird little Myst deep dive that I was very excited to go down because I'm obsessed with Myst right now. That Riven remake comes out. There's a demo, but I decided not to play it because I want to play the whole thing. June 25th, so it comes out next week. Devastatingly, I'm probably not going to play it on launch because of Elden Ring, which, I'm going to VidCon next week, and I'm staying in Anaheim for VidCon, and I'm just taking Elden Ring. So
I love the idea of going to Anaheim and being
to play
not
Elden Ring.
Entertainment here. I'm going to stay in my room and play a video game.
That is what I am doing.
That's amazing.
Yes, I'm just going to take.
I'm commercially required to say that there are other activities available in Anaheim.
Like what? None that I've ever heard of. What else could you do in Anaheim?
Let me tell you, Alanah. After we finish recording, I'll give you the speech.
Thank you. Also, as an extra side, everybody, I went and saw Kendrick Lamar live yesterday. For the first time since the Drake beef started. This did not seem like a thing that Mike Bithell specifically would be super into me talking about versus Myst. And it was...
Are you kidding? I was so invested.
Were you really?
That you don't think... Yeah, genuinely.
It was fucking crazy. He played Not Like Us
bring it up? Is he still...
5 times.
I mean, that's... But that is amazing. That people were playing that at parties. That was like a proper...
No part of me was upset about it. I was there, and so basically he got to the part where he says A minor, and then stopped for maybe a minute. Just silence. Restarted the song. Did that second time. Restarted the song. And then played through the whole song, I think 3 more times. It was fucking crazy. And being there in Inglewood, oh my god. Incredible.
Has Drake has he done anything since, or has he just disappeared off the face of the earth?
So he had the final diss track.
Yeah.
He released the final diss track. Kendrick did not respond. And I don't think Kendrick needed to respond because Drake's final diss track was him basically saying some really stupid shit and being like, "Oh, well, kind of I'm out." Like he ends it like that. Kendrick objectively, I guess it's not objectively, a lot of people disagree, but Kendrick didn't need to respond, I don't think. But then what happened
He's done at that
yesterday
point.
was the ultimate response. And then he started the set with Euphoria, played Not Like Us 5 times. Everyone in the whole fucking stadium, it was at the Kia Forum in Inglewood, just outside of LA, was singing Certified Lover Boy, Certified Pet, like it's crazy. And then he had a whole bunch, because like obviously Drake is known for um caring about, I don't really want to mischaracterize that, but like being associated with or being infatuated with or really liking his association with a lot of sports stars.
Mm-hmm.
So Kendrick at the end just pulled up a whole bunch of sports stars, and they had like this huge group photo that we were all just like awkwardly waiting for them to take, but I'm sure it was very, very cool. Um,
Oh,
it could not have been a better diss track. It's
no,
crazy.
that the timing. I was so grateful to both of them because I was traveling for work at the time and had nothing to do, so I just got hyper. This was my
Yeah.
Myst basically for like
We
2
could have
weeks.
spoken
just
about it. I
getting
was
really
also
into that.
very
We
into
could
it.
100% talks about that.
Yeah, it was so much
But
fun to be
the
there in
amount
person.
of the amount of muting you'd have to do for YouTube, it wouldn't be worth
Well,
it.
no, I do have a YouTube video about it. Because
Oh, you
I
do?
didn't, yeah, I
Okay.
didn't upload any videos for like 30 days because just been dealing with family
I only
stuff.
watch the ones I'm in, Alanah, so you know.
So none of them. But yeah, I had I uploaded a brief timeline of the Drake allegations. Like not about. I didn't feel like I should, White Girl from Australia, be making a video about the music, despite the fact that I've spoken about
People
it a
are
ton because I
waiting for your
love
take on
Kendrick.
it, I'm
That's the joke I made at the start of the video. I was like, I know you've all been waiting to hear what I have to say.
sure.
But I did do a timeline of events of the Drake allegations of like why he's being called a pedophile, because I do feel like it's one of those ones that people are really excusing, and we always go, why does nobody speak up when when it comes out someone's a pet? And it's like, well, here's a bunch of shit he did do that you probably shouldn't be ignoring, because there is a pretty long record of events. That yeah, it's the only thing that I made about it, other than just talking about it a lot on streams because the songs are so good. But yes, it was fucking cool to be there in person.
The
Also,
songs are so good.
Dre
That's the
came out.
problem.
So they did California Love, and then when they started Not Like Us at the end, it was Dr. Dre on mic going, I see dead people. Oh my god. It's so fucking cool. Incredible.
Again, like 90s Mike playing Starship Titanic while listening to Chronic. Like, yeah, no, that's
It was
amazing.
very, very, very cool.
This was a good conversation. You
very-
made me feel very nostalgic on this call.
Very enthusiastic episode today, everybody. Actually, by the time this episode comes out, because we're recording a week early, the Riven will already be out. If anyone wants to go down that rabbit hole, I might stream it. Because I have no spoilers. That's the only thing that makes me not want to stream it, is I don't want to have any puzzles spoiled for me, because that's the whole thing. They thought that the original Myst would take people months to finish. They added a save file
Really?
solely because they expected it to take people months and months and months to finish. I didn't even talk
That's
to you
why
about the
as game
maze.
developers, when you're asked in an interview, how long is your game, you never fucking answer that question. Because every developer throughout history has been convinced that people will take longer playing their game than the actual teenagers.
And the people are always
who play the game
disappointed.
on launch will be.
It's
And people
true.
are always annoyed. I've never answered that question to a journalist ever, and I never fucking will.
They thought it would take, Kojima thought it would take people way longer to beat PT. The internet. Yeah, I didn't even talk to you about
it's worse now because of compound information sharing.
Yeah.
People just figure stuff out
Reddit threads
much,
figure
much
it out
faster.
collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even talk to you about the Myst maze. Hey, maybe we have 2 Myst episodes. The maze,
I think
so
this
much
is
to
the show
say.
now.
Many thoughts. We just Myst cast from now on.
This is miscast.
Uh,
Until you come back, Austin, we're just going to talk about Myst.
Yeah, like that's a threat. I bet you he'll be like, you guys talking about Myst without me? Like we'll find out he's a huge Myst fan.
You know he knows 5
For sure he does. I didn't even talk about the audio.
The Myst tracks.
I didn't even talk about it. I'm sure Troy even
That's a
loves
focus for
Myst.
next episode.
Yeah, the audio of Myst.
Troy was probably in it. Like young
Almost
Troy
definitely,
Probably the
yeah.
kid is Troy. That would be my guess.
He's one of the books. Almost definitely. All right, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'm Alanah. I'm a video game writer. That's my Billy. He's a video game director. We will see you in 2 weeks' time.